Because conceptually, the framework is not very complex. Conceptually, the framework is very simple. You identify your design inputs, you do the design work, you get to the design outputs, you do design verification, you do design validation, and you're done, right? A lot of that overlaps with the activities we do as part of our risk management process, and we feed into our design control process characteristics related to safety, which are part of the risk analysis process. That helps us to identify hazardous situations too, right? But the characteristics related to safety, that activity actually allows us to establish, wherever applicable, some limits, and those limits are requirements. So conceptual framework is not very complex. I think this is a practice of connecting these moving parts and managing them on an ongoing basis as iterations are happening during design at a different pace. Managing all that becomes quite challenging. Hello, everyone, and welcome again to our weekly live discussion. I'm so excited to be with you again, and thanks for joining. Those of you who are coming back again, thank you for hanging in there with me. I hope you are getting value out of these sessions. And those of you who are joining for the first time, welcome. And again, it's my sincere hope that you will get a lot of value out of this. So friends, today we're going to be talking about the connection between risk management and design controls. And this is an area that even my thinking has evolved over time. And it is only recently, after thinking a lot about this, that I'm beginning to get some clarity. So if you are in a place where you have practiced this in a really nice way, I would really appreciate that you share your best practices and insights at any time in the Q&A box. But my perception is that this continues to be a big challenge in the industry, where full integration of risk management with design control proves to be very challenging in practice. So we want to talk about that, recognize a few areas of issues, and maybe share some best practices with you. 2 quick points of housekeeping before we get started. First, this session is being recorded. And second, nothing we discuss in these sessions should be taken as regulatory advice. Our purpose really here is to have a dialogue, have a conversation with each other. So let's jump right into this. If you look at ISO 14971, you immediately see that it is expecting a full connection with the design process, because the number 1 priority for risk control measures is for control measures which are inherently safe and manufacture. That's number 1 priority. Number 2 priority for risk control options is assigned to protective measures in the medical device itself or in the manufacturing process. And number 3 is information for safety and training to users. Those are the 3 types of risk control measures that have been identified in ISO 14971 in a priority order. And the reason for that prioritization is effectiveness. Risk control measures that are implemented through design are most effective. So that's why they get the number 1 priority. So if it is the expectation of the risk management process to implement control measures which are inherently safe by design and manufacture, or protective measures in the device or manufacturing process, or information for safety, we would expect a pretty tight coordination between the risk management process and the design control process. So I don't know how well this is working in the industry. My experience is that it is not. And people find it very difficult, very challenging. And I definitely want to hear from you. If it is working well for you, please share your insights and best practices in this area. We can learn from each other. Now, I also did a survey on LinkedIn asking a question, a very simple question to probe to what extent this was working in an integrated way. And the question that I asked my network is like this. Approximately what percentage of your design outputs for a current product are related to safety-related design inputs? Very high-level question. And my intention was to see if there was a connection in people's mind, first of all, and to what extent they were able to correlate the two. So first sign of a poor response was that it was only about 50 people who responded to that survey, compared to typically 100 or 150 people who respond to my LinkedIn polls. So that gave me a clue that in general, people don't have a good understanding of that. Maybe I'm guessing a lot about that. And out of those who responded, really about 20% of them said that less than 25% of their design outputs were related to safety-related design inputs. About 23% said between 25 and 50%. So nearly half of the people who responded are linking less than half of the design outputs to safety-related design inputs. About 30% of them said 50 to 75% of their design outputs are linked to safety-related design inputs. And another 20% said more than 75%. So obviously there's a range, but I came away with a general impression from that poll that in general, the visibility of the connection between design outputs and design inputs in the context of safety in general, and again, that was my perspective and perception, in general, that connectivity doesn't seem to be very clear. In some cases, it is. So again, I invite you to share your thoughts in case you're doing it well in your process, what it is that is working for you, what it is that you have been able to implement in your process that aligns these two different processes together. Because if you look at the risk management process and the design control process, these are two kind of different processes with a lot of connectivity in between. So they are interconnected, interrelated. There are many steps that overlap, especially during the design and development process, and even in the post-market phase where you may have to do some design changes. So there's a lot of overlap. And I have done project management in the industry. I have done product development in the industry, and I have not seen really a very tightly integrated process that connects risk management with design control. So that is where I'm standing right now. And I still am open to learning from all of you in the industry who may be doing this well. So again, please don't hold back and share your insights and perspectives about what might be working well for you. And if you are struggling with it, then please share a challenge. What is your specific challenge, where it is that you are struggling in this process? Comment here from Ravikant. This is not a problem for me. We generally link the design controls or mitigations to a system or subsystem requirements. That is absolutely the right way to do it. Now, I'm assuming that when you establish the system or subsystem requirements, you are also establishing safety requirements, not just performance or functional requirements. That's what I'm assuming, because if you are doing that, then you have tight connectivity. So I hope that is what is happening with you, Ravikant, and you are able to capture all the requirements, including safety requirements in your performance requirements, and then feeding them into the design control process, which is exactly how it should work. So if we think about what the design inputs are, so we have user needs in the design control process, we have design inputs, we have design outputs, we have design verification, we have design validation, a lot of activities going on in the process. So if we are doing design inputs right, which by definition are the basis for the device design, and it includes performance requirements, it includes safety requirements, reliability requirements, compatibility requirements with other devices, environmental regulations, maybe some standards, some regulatory requirements, packaging, labeling, all those requirements are part of design inputs. So if you are establishing your design inputs correctly, you have a list of these requirements. So the question number one is, where are these requirements coming from? Are they coming from different places? And the safety related requirements, if they are coming from the risk management process, what is the process of bringing them into the design control process? How does it work in practice? Do you use any templates or do you use any checklists? Do you use a stage gate model where before design inputs are finalized, you go through that process and see if all different types of requirements have been created? How do you characterize, how do you categorize your design inputs? And making sure that safety is included, not excluded out of that. Part of the process, not an afterthought. I hope that is the case. But let me know again how it is that you're doing. So to me, if I take a step back, to me, part of the risk analysis as described in ISO 14971 is characteristics related to safety. Now, in my practice, I have seen people use the questionnaire in one of the annexes of ISO 14971. Actually, now that annex is in ISO TR 24971. I have seen people just look at those questions, come up with some answers and document them. But in principle, really, that work that we do as part of characteristics related to safety should help us identify qualitative and quantitative characteristics that may have an impact on safety, and wherever possible, establish limits for safe operation. This to me sounds like a definition of design input. If you establish qualitative, quantitative characteristics and limits, those are requirements. And somehow those requirements need to feed into the design control process during the collection of design inputs. I'm still trying to figure out how that is happening in the industry. Somehow that process should take place. John, you are sharing that safety-related requirements come from our formal hazard analysis task throughout design input through design output. Maybe, John, you can say a little bit more about that, because I understand the design input side of it. I would like to understand what you mean by how they come through design output. So if design inputs are requirements, and some of them are safety requirements, which are coming from your analysis of characteristics related to safety as part of risk analysis, John, you are right that you are actually doing that as part of your hazard analysis process. You have a clarification here. See HA primer from Clifton Erickson. We have implemented that process. Okay, I will review that and take a look at how that works. So if that's how the design inputs are coming, how are the design outputs coming? Right? What are design outputs? By definition, design output is the result of your design activities. It includes the device itself, the specifications of the device, components, subcomponents, systems, subsystems, any requirement, any output that you create as part of the design activity is part of your design outputs, right? Any specification that you establish is a design output. A drawing is a design output. Specifications that you establish in the manufacturing process are design outputs. Acceptance testing methods that you establish for incoming parts, incoming raw materials, those are part of design outputs. Packaging, labeling are design output. And all of that form the body of the DMR, which is device master record. And again, this may not apply to processes outside the United States because I'm speaking the language of design controls here. But in principle, design outputs should map with design inputs, right? One or more design inputs may relate to one or more design outputs. Should be some kind of mapping, some kind of traceability of design inputs and design outputs. That's how you would know that you have actually produced the design that you were required to do or you were intending to produce. That's how you will know. So I have seen in the industry the practice of something called design input trace matrix. It's another trace matrix which connects design outputs with design inputs. And wherever applicable, they identify the product safety standards which are applicable. But I have not yet seen a very strong connectivity between safety characteristics and the design inputs that originate from safety characteristics and flow into the design control process. So, John, I will look into this reference that you have provided, Hazard Analysis Primer from Clifton Erickson, and I will discuss that in one of our future discussions, see how that process works. Okay, so we talked about design inputs, we talked about design outputs. We talked about characteristics related to safety, and we are expecting some connectivity in these three elements. Now, we also know that the design process works very iteratively. Throughout the design process, many iterations are going on. Many types of different testing is being done. Maybe prototypes are being developed, they're being tested. Some functionality is being addressed or some trade-offs are being made. So we do a lot of different types of work during the design process. It goes on iteratively. How do we connect that iteration to our hazard analysis process, which probably is running in parallel, especially because most of the industry is still using only an FMEA. They might be doing a preliminary hazard analysis, but most of the industry is still doing an FMEA. So how is that iteration working? And if the purpose of the FMEA is to really identify single faults, causes of those failure modes, and potentially establish requirements that should feed into our design input activity. So how is that being done iteratively, and how is that being connected to our hazard analysis? That may also happen iteratively. Okay, so we have additional comments here. John, you are saying that the design output linkage you are focusing seems related to essential design output identification. We identify essential design outputs in the risk analysis process. Okay, so again, let's talk about what risk analysis process is. Are we referring to the risk analysis process in the context of 14971, which includes not only failure risks, but also use-misuse risks, all kind of different scenarios, hazardous situations and harms, sequence of events. So it can be a very broad activity. If we do that work in the hazard analysis, somehow that should feed into our FMEA process or fault tree analysis process. Whatever tools we are utilizing to identify those requirements for our design, somehow it should feed into that. And as those iterations are being carried out during the design process, it should also connect with the iterative nature of the hazard analysis process itself. Maybe you uncover some new hazards as part of your risk control implementation. That has to be done as part of 14971, right? If you uncover those hazardous situations, they should all flow back into our hazard analysis process. So how do you manage this? How do you manage all these moving parts? Now, I have seen in practice a lot of project management work going on. There's a project manager assigned to a new product being developed in R&D. There are design quality assurance people involved, all kind of people involved. So who has ownership of the whole project and all these moving parts? And to what extent these details end up into our project management task register? To what extent? That's the question I'm asking. I would love to learn from all of you in the industry how it is happening in practice. Because conceptually, the framework is not very complex. Conceptually, the framework is very simple. You identify your design inputs, you do the design work, you get to the design outputs, you do design verification, you do design validation, and you're done, right? A lot of that overlaps with the activities we do as part of our risk management process, and we feed into our design control process characteristics related to safety, which are part of the risk analysis process. That helps us to identify hazardous situations too, right? But the characteristics related to safety, that activity actually allows us to establish, wherever applicable, some limits, and those limits are requirements. So conceptual framework is not very complex. I think this is a practice of connecting these moving parts and managing them on an ongoing basis as iterations are happening during design at a different pace. Managing all that becomes quite challenging, is where I have experienced. Your experience, of course, may be very different from that. And that is what I'm hoping to learn from you in these conversations. So I want to share with you actually an example of a recall that I just came across, which is insightful. And they identified design as a contributing factor in this case. So I thought that could be an interesting example for us to talk about briefly. So this is a case of a two-part system. One of them is a wearable insulin pump, tubeless insulin pump, and the other one is a handheld controller, which they call a PDM, Personal Diabetes Management System. Now, this handheld system is like a smartphone. It has a rechargeable battery. And what they are highlighting in this recall is this battery could actually leak, could overheat, and there could be a hazard of fire. These batteries are also known to bulge, get out of shape, and as a result, they may rupture and leakage may occur. And they're relating that to design. So I take a step back and think about this particular scenario, how this could have happened. These are two different parts. Maybe they are being addressed as two different projects. Maybe the pump is being designed and developed by one team. PDM is being designed and developed by another team. There's an interface between the two. I'm sure there's some testing going on. right? But where are the requirements for these two parts of the whole system? How is that whole process being developed and considered? And how is that being linked to the hazard analysis? Now, it could be that the hazard analysis is pretty robust for the pump because that is directly connected to insulin delivery. And we know if the insulin level is not delivered correctly, if it's over-delivered or under-delivered, we might have a lot of problem. So I'm guessing that the hazard analysis for the insulin pump side could be pretty robust. What about the hazard analysis for the PDM? What kind of hazards we have identified, and have we connected the two? So I'm thinking in this particular scenario, it is quite possible that maybe the battery is from another supplier. Maybe it's off the shelf. Maybe the design of the compartment or the cabinet where the battery sits is designed for a certain level of expansion, certain level of temperature. Maybe those requirements are coming from, I would say, previous prototypes or previous designs. Maybe we have not tested to extreme. However, whatever reasons might be, but we are seeing this impact in the field, and as a result, this recall has been initiated. So this gives me a perspective that, we do a lot of complicated designs in our industry. We have many different components and parts, and those systems have to interact with each other. And how are we managing hazard analysis at the system level, at the subsystem level, at the component level? How are we managing the design requirements at those levels, and how are we integrating the two? It's a practice of that. It's the project management side of that, which I'm thinking could be a challenge in practice. So I don't know how well it resonates with your experience. Some of you obviously are doing very well, and you have shared your process with me, which I really appreciate, by the way. And I appreciate your engagement and openness in sharing your the best practices. John, you're also sharing here that you're also doing fault tree analysis. Fantastic. So you are building that connectivity up in the whole system, whole process. So you have a lot of tools at your disposal, and you are able to manage this level of complexity. So the bottom line, friends, is that we do see a lot of events and incidents happen in the field that point back to design. Even after so many years after design control was included in the quality system regulation, nearly 2 decades have passed. And still we see a lot of problems that are being tied back to design. So I think it is reflecting our challenge in the industry of being able to properly manage the complexity in our design processes and connectivity in our risk management processes. How are we doing that? It's definitely an open topic of discussion. We're not going to resolve that in a short conversation like this. So think of this as more of a conversation starter. But to summarize, I know we are running short on time here. To summarize, really, I would say that the conceptual framework is not very difficult. The conceptual framework is very, very simple. We do characteristics related to safety as part of our risk analysis process in ISO 14971. We identify those characteristics related to safety that could be qualitative or quantitative, and we establish appropriate limits wherever applicable for safe operation. Hopefully, those action limits or safe limits are flowing into our design process as design inputs, and we have traceability to them, because eventually we have to figure out whether we have put all the required appropriate risk control measures or not from a 14971 point of view. So we have to bring it back into our risk management process after all the design outputs have been done and design verification is complete, right? Somehow we have to bring it back. So that's the connectivity of this whole process between risk management and design controls. From a conceptual point of view, I don't think there is a problem with that. I think it is very straightforward, but it's a practice of that. It's the actual implementation of that which seems to be a challenge. In my experience, I have not yet seen a good implementation of that. And those of you who have done it, I would love to chat more. Maybe we discuss one-on-one what it is that you have done and what it is that has worked for you, and how we can collaborate and share that knowledge in an open way, because we want to really improve the entire industry as a whole. So if there is no proprietary information, we should be able to share some best practices. That is my hope through these conversations as well. Because conceptually, I think all of us have a fairly good understanding of how these two things should work together. But it's the real practice of that, which is where we have a problem. And the evidence is straightforward. I think I see so many safety alerts from the FDA. I see so many recall announcements, which are linked back to the design. That is really giving me a feeling that the practice is very challenging. And we are doing the best we can, but we are still falling short of where we should be. So I hope this was useful to you. Let me know in your feedback how you are feeling about these sessions. You will receive a very quick one-question survey asking your suggestions for topics and questions for future discussions. You can use the same survey to provide me feedback. What will work for you in a much better way, what we should change, and what we should keep doing. Because the whole purpose here is to really talk about topics that are of interest to you and in a way that is useful to you and valuable to you. So I really look forward to receiving that feedback from you. Finally, guys, this is going to be our last session of the year. We have the holiday season. So I hope you will be able to take some time off to recharge your batteries, relax a little bit, and enjoy this holiday season. Enjoy your accomplishments that you have achieved in this year. I know all of us have worked very hard, and reflect on the lessons learned. Come back refreshed in 2023, and let's all do good things in the industry. Let's keep doing the good things that our industry is doing, innovating on medical technologies, bringing these life-saving devices to the market, and improving our systems and processes, whether it is risk management or design control. Let's keep doing all that. And let's keep collaborating and sharing information like this. So once again, thank you for attending. Have a good holiday season, everybody. And I look forward to meeting you in 2023.